Many old games used paper and passwords to save and load the game. I am Bisqwit, and in this series we crack video game password generators. G.I.Joe is a slang term that refers to enlisted soldiers in the USA Army. It is also a merchandise brand that includes action figures, comic strips, movies and video games. When I published episode 9 which covered River City Ransom, a game known for its very long and complex passwords, several people commented and suggested that I take a look at G.I.Joe the Atlantis Factor. It has crazy passwords. This is the password screen shown when you begin any level except the first. At first glance, there are a total of whopping 126 little squares which may contain letters. Most of them are blank though. 14 different characters are seen on the screen already, plus the space, so the character set must be at least 16 symbols long. This makes the password weight at least 504 bits, which is the most expensive password I have seen in any game so far. Is my calculation correct? Let's do some experiments to study it closer. This is the password enter screen. There are 126 little squares as we previously confirmed. Firstly, the game kindly prevents you from inputting any invalid characters. Incidentally, all vowels are invalid characters. For instance, you cannot input the letter A. This is probably because of official Nintendo policy back in the day that people should not be able to input obscene words. Since most words need vowels, removing vowels was an efficient way to do that. In total there are 32 different symbols, the entire English alphabet sans vowels, plus 10 numeric digits, plus the copyright symbol. Next, the position. The password entry is divided into 14 boxes, each containing 9 little squares. Each of these boxes may contain exactly one symbol in one of the 9 squares. You cannot place 2 letters in the same box. The game also prohibits leaving the box empty. There has to be one symbol somewhere in the box. Armed with this knowledge, let's revise our calculation of the password complexity. There are 14 boxes. In each of the 14 boxes you can have one of 32 different symbols in one of 9 different positions. 32 times 9 equals 288, so therefore in each box you can make 288 different choices. This brings the total number of different possible passwords to about 27 decillion in the short scale or 27 quintilliard in the long scale. The password weight becomes about 114 bits. Next I spent 2 whole days deciphering the assembler code of this game. 11 hours the first day and 9 hours the second day. Boy, this game is tricky. It uses coroutines and jump tables all over the place, switching stacks all the time, and worst of all, significant sections of the program code are not even stored in the program ROM. That's right, this game actually loads program code through the graphics processor from the graphics ROM and executes it in the CPU's RAM. I mean, it's not like I haven't ever done something like that, but in the end I did prevail, and here's what I found. This game centers around the world map. You start here and the objective is to get here. Along the way there are 16 roads, 6 areas and 6 bees, whatever these are. We'll get back to these bees later. Every time you select a route or an area, you get to select which characters you bring with you. There are a total of 6 playable characters and you can sometimes bring 3. They are General Hawk, Duke, Roadblock, Wetsuit, Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. Inside the game you'll notice there are a total of 5 weapons that you might use. The punches or sword attacks. The machine gun. You start the game with these 2 weapons. But there is also the pulse rifle, the laser rifle and the rocket launcher. You collect these weapons as you progress throughout the game. Each of these 5 weapons has an associated level number. Each weapon begins at level 1. After collecting 4 power-ups, the weapon is upgraded to level 2 and after another 4 it's upgraded to level 3 and then level 4. Level 4 is the maximum for each weapon. But it is not enough to power up the weapon on one character. Each of the player characters has a separate set of weapon levels. Each player character also has a personal hit point maximum. It begins at some value, but grows as the player may collect up to a total of 4 HP power-ups. Globally there is an 8-digit score and a 4-digit number of remaining ammo. You may additionally have up to 9 mine shields and 9 radios. When you activate the radio, you can call a friend. There are 3 friends whom you may call. Spirit, who fully heals your whole party. Gung-Ho, who gives you 100 extra ammo. And Big Bear, who resuscitates any fellow members in your party. Of course, just like with the player characters, you must first unlock these friends before they can be called. Here are the RAM addresses that store all the information I just listed. Besides all the stuff I already mentioned, there is also the number of game completions, which doubles as a difficulty level, and the number of areas you have completed. The last 5 fields are bit masks. So, about passwords. The passwords do not save the score, so we can cross that out from the list. The passwords do not save the ammo. The passwords also don't save the number of mine shields or the number of radios. The number of completed areas can be calculated from the beast masks, so that is not saved separately. To unlock radio calls, you must beat certain areas or bees, so for the purpose of the password, it is enough to just save whether those areas have been beaten or not. Same goes for the unlocked weapons. The first 2 weapons are given at the start of the game, and the rest depend on beating some particular area, so that information does not need to be saved separately in the password. The player characters also follow the same suit. Note that General Hawk has 0 dependencies because he's given at the start of the game, and Duke has 2 dependencies, so that information does not need to be saved separately in the password. That leaves the bit masks. At some point in the development, they decided to save some space by not saving those 4 unused bits, but they made a boo-boo. What happened is that they dropped these 4 other bits instead. That's right, you can never get a password in this game where route 13, route 15 or route 16 is already cleared for you. However, you can get 16 different passwords that only differ in the contents of some 4-bit memory region that does not affect the game in any manner. Now the weapon levels are internally 4-bit, meaning they range from 0 to 15, but only the high 2 bits are presented to the player, and that's what the password saves as well. For the hit points, the game stores internally the current hit point maximum for each character, but in the password the default hit point maximum is subtracted from that number in order to get a 2-bit value to save some space. So how much data do we have now? Let's calculate. We get 2 bits for each 5 weapons of 6 characters, that makes 60 bits. 2 bits for hit points of 6 characters, that's 12. Difficulty level is 2 bits, and the completion flags are 28 bits in total. Therefore, the total data comes to 102 bits. Let's move on to how these are stored in the password. The password is comprised of 14 8-bit bytes. The first 9 bytes contain the hit points and weapon levels for all 6 characters. Each group of weapons and hit points takes 1.5 bytes, so the structure aligns itself nicely every 3 byte boundaries. Beginning at byte 9 are the 28 flag bits. First the 6 area flags, then the 6 B flags, then the 4 unused bits as we discussed earlier, and then the 12 root bits. Instead of the remaining 4 root bits, there is the difficulty level and some 0 padding before the checksum. Note that in the passwords generated by the game, Area F can never be completed because beating Area F constitutes beating the game. So technically that's another unused bit. However, if you craft a password in which this bit is set, the game literally becomes unbeatable because the Cobra command is already assumed to be beaten. The checksum is calculated by negating the sum of the first 13 bytes and taking the low 8 bits from the result. Now if you remember, on the password screen there are 14 boxes, and within each box there are 9 cells. Within each box you can enter one of 32 different symbols in one of 9 possible positions. Here is an exercise. What is the position and the symbol number for this example box? If you said position 5 and symbol 12, you were correct. Let's walk through the process that this game uses to convert the bytes into pairs of position and symbol. First, here is the general gist of it. Each symbol is taken from the low 5 bits of the corresponding byte, modified somehow, and each position is taken from the upper 3 bits, modified somehow. The last symbol is different in that it's taken from the checksum byte. Now we just need to define what those modifications are. The operations are like this. On each iteration, the symbol code is added together with the high 5 bits of something called a long sum, and the position number is processed with the long sum, and also something called a short sum, and the module 9 is taken from the result. The curious short and long sums are variables that are pre-initialized with the low 3 and 8 bits of the checksum respectively. After each iteration, 3 is added to the short sum and the low 3 bits of the result are taken. The long sum is permuted in a more complex manner. First it is rotated left by 1 bit, then it is XORed by a constant and another constant is added to it and the low 8 bits of the result are taken. This process is looped for the first 13 bytes. Finally, the last byte is the checksum, which is converted into a symbol and position as indicated below. Now I don't know about you, but as I have said before, I much prefer my program code to have few statements rather than many statements when given the choice. The short sum can be calculated directly from the iteration count. It does not need to be iterated over. This reduces the number of statements in the code. I was not able to do the same for the long sum. Can you? Let me know. In any case, this is the password encoder in full. Now let's do the same in reverse, in other words, decode the password. We can keep the long sum formula on screen. It was needed in encoding, so obviously it will be needed in decoding as well. The process is the reverse now. We have symbols and positions, and we want to create bytes. First, we get the checksum from the last box. This is simple because the only obfuscation there was one XOR, and to revert the XOR operation you just apply the same XOR operation again. As for the rest of the bytes, first I want to give you a chance. On screen is the encoding formula that creates a symbol and position from a byte. Can you devise its reverse, that is, create a byte from the symbol and position? I give you 5 seconds. Pause the video if you want. Well, here we go. Here is the easy one first, the symbol. To revert the addition, you change it into subtracting, right? This is how the position is decoded. I don't even try to explain how it works. That's what the game does, and it works perfectly. Finally, once all bytes have been decoded, the checksum is verified. The 8-bit sum of all bytes must be 0 or the password is rejected. After performing those 2 light validations, the game checks those flag bits and unlocks weapons and characters accordingly. And that's all there is to the encoding and decoding. Now it is time to draw some observations. There can never be a symbol in the bottom right corner of the password because the last box only uses 3 bits for the position value. But the game never actually checks if the bottom right corner is used, which means that for the last box and for the last box only, positions 0 and 8 are interchangeable. This means that, for example, these 2 passwords shown on the screen are both accepted by the game and produce identical game state. For any other box, placing a symbol in the wrong cell will invalidate the password. As I previously mentioned, the password contains a bit for area F, which is the Cobra command, but the game will never generate a password with that bit set. If you do enter a password with that bit set, such as the one shown on the screen, you will get an unwinnable game. The password data contains 6 bits of data that are used for absolutely nothing. 2 of those the game will outright discard, and the 4 are saved in a part of memory that the game never cares about. In other words, for any situation in the game, there are 64 different passwords that encode the same game situation. The game only generates one of them. Because the game map is somewhat linear, but the completion bit mask is not, normally you cannot create situations where later stages are already completed while earlier stages are not, but with passwords you can still synthesize them. Speaking of impossible situations, with passwords you can level up weapons before you have even unlocked them. You can even level up them for characters you have not yet unlocked. Finally, there are 3 difficulty modes in this game: easy, hard and insane. Each is unlocked by beating the game on the previous difficulty level. However, the difficulty level field in the password is 2-bit, which means it can take 4 different values. It is possible to start the game using a difficulty level that is impossible to achieve in the game by normal means. I don't know nearly enough about this game to be able to test it fully, but from what I understood from the disassembly, in most situations this difficulty mode will behave like hard mode, but there are a couple of situations where the game explicitly checks for hard mode, but the check will fail, and I am not sure exactly what the ramifications are in that situation. So I wrote an encoder decoder for this password scheme, as a proof of concept. Do you recognize this programming language? It's written at the top of the screen. This is the first time ever that I write something in theme or in any Lisp derivative. Tell me how you like it. What could I have done better? Be gentle, it's my first program. In any case, it does its job successfully in both directions. Not bad for a language that does not have writable variables. Well, it does actually, but I chose not to use them. I am Bisqwit. The next time we will take an in-depth look at a game that almost everyone has heard of. Stay tuned and have a very nice day.